Rome, 80 AD, the absolute zenith of the empire, the brightest, most magnificent days of Emperor Titus's reign. 15 meters above the ground, baking under the relentless Italian sun, the greatest architectural wonder human history has ever seen is rising. The Flavian Amphitheatre. Or, as the future centuries will come to know it, the Colosseum. Clad in pristine white travertine stones, brought all the way from Tivoli, and adorned with thousands of marble statues standing guard in its arches. This colossal structure is not just a building, it is a statement. It is Rome's way of screaming to the barbaric world, to the heavens, and to history itself. We are the masters of the earth. We rule over everything. Inside this stone beast, 50,000 Roman citizens are cheering in unison. It is a roar like thunder, a sound so powerful it shakes the foundations of the city. Senators in their white togas edged with purple, battle-hardened generals, sacred Vestal virgins, bakers, merchants, and mothers with babies sleeping on their laps. All are here. The scent in the air is dizzying, a complex perfume of civilization and savagery. Saffron-infused mist is being sprayed from hidden pipes to cool the air. The expensive, heavy oriental oils of the wealthy mix with the greasy smoke of roasting pork from street vendors. And heavier than all of it, permeating every pore of the skin, the intense metallic intoxication of victory. But we are not there. That is the world the history books choose to write about. That is the world tourist guides describe with romantic words. The shiny world of marble statues, philosophical debates, and gilded columns. But that world is a lie, or at least only half the truth. We are in the place where those cheers are felt only as dust motes falling from the cracks in the ceiling. We are where the roar of the crowd is nothing but a muffled, terrifying hum vibrating through the floor beneath your bare feet. We are in the place where the light of the sun does not reach, the place history ignores. We are underground, in the Hypogeum. This is where Rome takes off its mask of civilization and flings it aside. This is the engine room of that massive spectacle above. But unlike modern engines, this machine doesn't run on steam, coal, or electricity. It runs on blood, fear, and human flesh. Even the air smells different here. Above, it smelled of saffron and pork. Here, the air is heavy, a physical weight pressing against your lungs. It reeks of stale blood that has soaked into the earth for years. It smells of the sharp, ammonia-rich urine of lions and tigers kept in the dark for weeks to make them aggressive. It smells of the rotting flesh of untreated wounds, of human feces, of sweat and terror, and dominating it all, the cold, metallic, sterile scent of bureaucracy. This is a labyrinth, a nightmare of engineering. The corridors are narrow and winding, the ceilings oppressively low, the walls blackened by the soot of oil lamps that burn day and night. It is the waiting room for death. It is the final stop for gladiators, for exotic beasts shipped from Africa, and for the condemned. Right now, focus on yourself. You are in a cell. But this isn't a chaotic, damp medieval dungeon you see in fantasy movies. This is something far more terrifying. This is a logistics depot designed by the superior, cold engineering intelligence of the Roman state. Under Roman law, you are not a human being. You are not a woman. You are not a mother. You are not an individual who falls in love, dreams of the future, or feels fear. You are a res. That is the legal term. A thing. Just like a wooden table, a brass candlestick, an agricultural tool, or the iron rake used to sweep the bloody sand in the arena upstairs. You are a piece of property registered in the state inventory, a number, a disposable asset. And soon, when the massive spectacle above concludes, when the sun sets and the crowds disperse to their comfortable homes, Rome's darkest, most systematic ritual will begin. A silent process that historians were too ashamed to write down for centuries. but which emperors viewed as deserved entertainment and a political necessity. Victoria Carnalis, the Carnal Victory. This story doesn't begin with a gladiator's sword or a general's order. It begins with something much more mundane, the quill of a bored civil servant. In the semi-darkness of the corridor, a makeshift wooden desk stands against the wall, barely illuminated by a flickering oil lamp. The desk is cluttered with parchments, wax tablets, and inkwells. Sitting at it is an ordinary man, a commentariensis, a record keeper. Beside him sits a young apprentice, perhaps 15 years old, learning the trade. The clerk is tired. He rubs his eyes, his fingers stained with ink. The noise of the games above, the screams of dying men, the roar of the crowd, is of no concern to him. He has heard it 1,000 times. He dreams only of his shift ending, of walking back to his small, cramped apartment in the Suburra district, taking off his sandals and drinking a cup of cheap, watered-down wine. But the parchment before him is a weapon sharper, more cruel than any sword in the arena. Swords only kill bodies. These parchments destroy identities, pasts, honor, and souls. He dips his pen into the inkwell with a calm, almost mechanical motion. He looks up at the row of cells opposite him, at the trembling shadows huddled behind rusty iron bars. There are women there torn from the misty forests of Britain, from the snowy, jagged mountains of Dacia, from the scorching golden deserts of Judea, or the flat plains of Thrace. Women whose villages were burned to ash, whose husbands were crucified before their eyes, whose babies were ripped from their arms and sold in slave markets like cattle. The apprentice checks the wax tablet in his hand, trying to be helpful. Sir, which group is this? The Germans who arrived this morning? The clerk doesn't even lift his head. He doesn't look at the women's faces. To him, they have no story. They have no pain. They are just numbers. Just stock items to be processed. Cell 4B, he mutters, scratching the paper. Female. Origin. Dacia. Age, estimated 19. Name, no records needed. Health status, usable. Category, Munera gift. Class A, Gladius reward. He pauses for a second, turning to the apprentice with a look of mild annoyance. Gag the one in 4B if she makes too much noise. Maximus likes silence, and we wouldn't want to distract him. He fights again tomorrow. This is where the true savagery of Rome lies. Not in the blood spilled on the sand, but here, at this desk. For a rape, a torture, a murder to become state policy, all that is required is for it to be written down, categorized, and stamped by a bureaucrat. Rome had transformed savagery from a chaotic act of looting into an engineering marvel. Just as they built those massive aqueducts to carry fresh water for kilometers, just as they paved straight roads to connect the known world, they standardized sexual violence. They tied it to a reward system. They organized evil. Above, the games are finally over. The sun is setting, painting the sky in hues of blood orange. The torches are dying out. The noise fades. But the massive elevator systems beneath the arena, those complex pulley mechanisms that are the marvel of the age, are still working. Squeaks, the clinking of heavy chains, the groan of wooden levers. These elevators are no longer carrying hungry tigers and bears up to the sunlight. Now, they are lowering the victors, Rome's heroes, down into the underground. Let's rewind time a little. Let's understand the weight of this moment. How did you get to this cell? Who were you before you felt the coldness of this stone? The last honorable moment you remember was watching your village, your beloved wooden home consumed by flames. You remember the sound of the Roman legions advancing, that rhythmic, disciplined, cold death machine. Thump, thump, thump. Afterwards, your memory is a nightmare in pieces. Marches lasting for months. Heavy iron rings around your neck, rubbing your skin raw. Chain wounds on your ankles. Endless hunger. Thirst that made you drink from muddy puddles. And then, the entry into Rome. The triumph. The victory march. You were walked through the Roman Forum, the center of the world, chained together with thousands of others behind the general's gold-gilded chariot. The people, the civilized Romans, spat on you. They threw rotten fruit peels. They mocked you, humiliated you, called you barbarians. Yet your only crime was protecting your home. Your only crime was trying to defend your land against invaders. They stripped you naked in the streets. They separated the good-looking ones. They forcibly cut your hair, or conversely matted it with mud, so you would look more savage, more like the monsters they wanted you to be. They exhibited you like a circus animal. Then the great separation began. Officials separated you just like farmers sorting livestock at a market. The elderly, the sick, and the weak were sent to the mines, which is a sentence of slow, dark, and certain death in the bowels of the earth. Small children were taken crying from their mother's arms and sold to eastern markets. You will never see them again. They will forget their language, their parents, even their own names. Strong men were sent to the gladiator schools, ludus, or the quarries to break stone until they died. And you, young women, you were separated into arena inventory damnatio status. They brought you here into the bowels of the world's greatest monument. You haven't seen the sun for days. The only things you hear are the screams above, animal roars, and the groans of a slave with a cut tongue from the adjacent cell. Waiting. Waiting was the heaviest form of torture. Footsteps echo from the end of the corridor. These are not the shuffling steps of a slave. These are heavy, rhythmic, threatening sounds. The sound of metal-studded military sandals, caligay, hitting the stone. Clack, clack, clack. The person approaching is not a monster. He is the darling of the Roman people. A superstar whose face is crafted into mosaics on dining room floors, whose statues are erected in town squares, whose sweat noble Roman women pay a fortune to buy in small vials like perfume. A gladiator, maybe a heavily armored Mamilio with his fish-crested helmet, maybe a retiarius holding his net and trident. He hasn't taken off his armor yet. He's still covered in the coarse sand of the arena. He's caked in his own sweat, and the dried blood of the man he killed just an hour ago. Perhaps an old friend he trained with at the same school, someone he shared bread with last night. Adrenaline still circulates through his veins like poison. His heart is still racing. He survived the arena today. 50,000 people shouted his name. The emperor raised his thumb and spared him. He didn't die. And Rome has a promise written in his contract, a perverse incentive. The survivor deserves the spoils. An arena official, perhaps a Lannister assistant, accompanies the gladiator, holding a large iron keyring. This scene resembles a food distribution or a logistics operation more than a crime scene. The official looks at the list in his hand, checks names in the dim candlelight, then points to cell number 3. Dacian, new arrival, considered clean. The doctor checked her this morning, says the official, praising a piece of merchandise. The Emperor's gift. Enjoy it, Maximus. Tomorrow will be a hard day against the Thracians. The gladiator nods. There is neither hatred nor desire in his eyes. This is not passion. This is not lust. This is a transaction. This is part of his salary. After a day where he came nose to nose with death, where he had to chop up his friends to feel alive, this is a right offered to him to prove to himself he still holds power. It is a drug to numb the trauma. You are huddled on that cold stone bench in your cell, trying to make yourself small. The rusty bolt on the door opens with a loud screeching noise, the sound of metal rubbing against metal. The torchlight flooding in burns your eyes, accustomed to the darkness. The gladiator enters. His massive shadow covers the wall, falls upon you, swallows the room. The door closes behind him, and then the sound of the lock turning. Click. That sound. It is like the end of the world. The air inside the room suddenly vanishes. What happens here in this 10 square meter stone room is the true, uncensored, bloody face of the gladiator legend. Hollywood movies sell you a version full of love, honor, rebellion, and brotherhood. In those films, gladiators are noble spirited heroes fighting for freedom. In reality, they are often both victims of the system and its most ruthless executioners. They are traumatized men, molded by violence, turned into death machines who have killed their humanity just to survive another day. The Roman hierarchy is ruthless and simple. The emperor crushes the senator crushes the citizen crushes the slave crushes the captive woman. And the last link in this chain disappears between those stone walls as a statistic, unheard by anyone. What I am telling you is not the imagination of a dark screenwriter. The evidence stands there even now, at this very second. If you go to Rome today, if you step off the beaten tourist path of the Colosseum and descend into the depths of the eastern Hypogeum, tunnels entered only with special permission, you can hear the horror whispered by the architecture itself. In the first excavations conducted in the 19th century and in detailed laser scanning studies later in 2018 by University of Rome archaeologists, strange rooms were found in these tunnels. These rooms didn't look like animal cages, carcers. They were too small for a lion or a bear, and the doors were different. They didn't look like gladiator restrooms either, as there was no comfort, no benches, no equipment racks. Look at the walls. You will see iron rings meticulously embedded into the stone at different heights, sometimes at waist level, sometimes at floor level. These rings are fixed to the wall with lead and mortar, solidified as if they were part of the original construction plan. These rings are not for tying animals. Those rings couldn't hold the strength of a leopard. These rings were designed for human anatomy. They were placed there to bind a human's wrists and ankles, to keep them fixed in specific vulnerable positions, to completely break their physical resistance. This is not an improvised torture chamber created by rogue guards. These rooms were drawn into the Colosseum's blueprints by the Empire's best engineers. Just like the Imperial Box, Pulvinar, where the Caesar sat, just like the complex water drainage systems, the architect slid his ruler down and drew these rape and exploitation cells. This is the summary of what we call Roman civilization. The perfect, spine-chilling harmony of aesthetics and brutality. Marble and blood. Look closer at the walls as if looking through a magnifying glass. Beneath the dust, dampness, and mold of 2,000 years, you can see scratch marks. The desperate traces of women who didn't know Latin, carving their final prayers into the stone in their own tongues. Perhaps Celtic, perhaps Aramaic, perhaps a Germanic dialect lost to time. A graffito found beneath the Capua arena, written in broken Latin, screams from the past. My children are dead. I still breathe. Why are the gods deaf? Take me. Another has carved just a single word. Veritas, meaning truth. Maybe the only truth in her world was pain. Everything else remaining outside, the empire, the victory, the glory, the games. It was all a lie. However, the system didn't only operate at night, behind closed doors. Sometimes, Rome brought this brutality out into the sun under the guise of art, culture, and mythology, making 50,000 people watch it live. Noon hours. The midday break, called Meridiani. The morning animal hunts are over. The afternoon major gladiator fights haven't started yet. The crowd is eating lunch. Intermission shows were organized so the crowd wouldn't get bored. The Roman poet Martial, in his work De Spectaculis, On the Spectacles, describes these moments like a tableau of pride, with literary language and artistic sentences. They called them mythological reenactments. Sounds elegant, doesn't it? Like theatre, like an opera. But the actors were not volunteers, and the deaths were not fake. Imagine they chose you to reenact the legend of Pasiphae. According to the ancient myth, the Cretan queen Pasiphae fell in love with a bull. Rome wants to realize this myth on stage. They take you from your cell. Arena officials wash you nicely, comb your hair, dress you in expensive silk tunics imported from the East, put gold jewelry on your neck. Then they bring you out to the middle of the arena, onto those scorching white sands. While your eyes try to adjust to the blinding sun, you see a wooden prop resembling a cow in front of you. They tie you inside or onto this prop. You cannot move. You are trapped. And then the gate at the other end of the arena opens with a roar. From the darkness, a massive Cretan bull, starved for days, beaten in the dark, prodded with hot irons, about to go mad with rage, is released into the arena. 50,000 people, senators, philosophers, poets, noblewomen, even children sitting on their fathers' shoulders, while eating their honeyed figs, fresh bread, and holding wine cakes in their hands. They watch that bull run towards you. They watch you being torn apart, sexually assaulted, and dying in screams by that beast. No one is horrified. No one looks away. No one covers their children's eyes. No one says, "This is wrong." On the contrary, they applaud the emperor wildly for staging mythology so realistically, for presenting such an artistic death. This is not an execution. This is porn. Violence porn. Marshall, after watching this, writes, "I believed legends were only stories until I saw Caesar's arena. Here, every myth takes on flesh and bone. Every legend is written in blood. To them, this is proof that Rome commands nature, history, and the body. Your pain is their power. According to Roman morality, the losing side has no honor. If you conquered, you have the right to everything. If you were conquered, you are merely a pile of flesh that breathes and suffers. The most terrifying part of this system is not the violence itself, but its banality, its ordinariness. When the gladiator finishes his job in the cell, he stands up. He adjusts his armor. He unlocks the door. He nods to the guard at the door, perhaps says, "See you tomorrow." He goes upstairs, enters a hot bath, gets a massage with olive oil. Maybe in the evening, he sits in a tavern with friends, rolls dice, drinks wine, tells stories of that day's fight, and laughs. Meanwhile, the woman inside remains all alone on the freezing stone floor in the dark, with her shattered body and crushed soul. No doctor comes, no priest comes, no consolation is offered. Only, if she's lucky, slaves cleaning in the morning leave a bucket of water under the door. Or they come to collect her corpse. If she dies, and most die within a few weeks due to infection, blood loss, or suicide, her family is not notified. No funeral ceremony is held. No lament is sung. Her body is loaded onto a cart with other waste, broken weapons, and dead animals. It is thrown into the murky waters of the Tiber River, or dumped into mass pits called puticuli outside the city walls to be fed to stray dogs and vultures. A short, emotionless note is dropped into the registry by the clerk we met earlier. Exitus, meaning exited, died, gone. A date is added next to it. That is all. The summary of a human life, reduced to a single word. The names of these women have been erased from history. Tacitus, Seneca, Livy, Suetonius. Great historians wrote in excruciating detail what emperors ate for dinner, the names of generals' favorite horses, even the smallest gossip in the Senate. But they mentioned almost nothing of the tens of thousands of women who died in these cells. Why? Not because they were ashamed, nor because they wanted to hide it, because they didn't find it worth mentioning. To a Roman mind, the breaking of a chair in the house is as tragic as the rape and death of a captive woman, which means not at all. They were fuel for the empire, that's all. They were merely pieces of wood that needed to be spent for the glory of Rome. When you look at the Colosseum today, it is impossible not to admire the engineering genius lying behind those massive arches. We are mesmerized by the power of Rome. Tourists take photos with actors in plastic gladiator costumes in front of it. They laugh. They eat ice cream under the same sun. But stones remember. Those stones absorb the blood spilled on them. The fear seeped into them, and they keep it for centuries. We have to tell this story. We have to speak for those who had no voice. Because Victoria Carnalis was not a perversion unique to ancient Rome, a barbarism left in the past. This is the universal, timeless proof of what power turns into when left unchecked, how man objectifies man. Rome normalized this through laws, through bureaucracy, and through architecture. They turned it into an industry. They organized evil. Now, as you prepare to hit that like button or leave a comment, think about this. Is history a fairy tale adorned with marble statues and gold leaf, written only by the winners? Or is it the silent, muffled scream of those crushed beneath those marbles? Today we hear that scream. The doors of those cells are now open to the tourists. The iron rings have rusted away. The empire has collapsed and the Caesars have turned to dust. But what happened in those dark rooms remains in humanity's collective memory, like a scar that never heals. Gladiators were not always heroes. The Colosseum was not a sacred place. And those women, those nameless shadows, were not just things. They were the victims who paid the heaviest price of civilization. And their story is a truth much more solid, much more bitter, and much more enduring than the fallen marble columns of Rome.